Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're actually going to tackle building a really complex UI. So as you can see on the screen, we're actually going to be building the Clubhouse app. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to build this in SwiftUI, and we're going to build this feed, as you can see, and we're also going to build the profile. So if I click on my profile, it takes me to the profile screen, and if I hit back, it takes me back to the previous feed screen. And if I tap on a room, you can see here how we have our room with all the people in it. And if we just hit to leave, we can also tap on another room, and you can see here how the room is a bit different because of the people in the room. So we're also going to tackle building this as well by adding some dark mode support. So I'm just going to turn on dark mode now. And as you can see, the application automatically picks up our dark mode, and it looks pretty nice. So in order for us to basically build this, I've actually provided you with a starter project. So in order to use this starter project, all you need to do is go to GitHub. I'll put the link for this in the description box below. So there's actually a project here called Clubhouse Starter Project. So all we need to do is just go to YouTube resources in the link, code, download the zip. Okay, cool. So now we've downloaded our resources. So if we just open up the folder, you'll see the Clubhouse Starter Project. I'm just going to move this onto my desktop so I can just work with it easier. So we just open this up, and then we open up the Xcode project. And now it may ask you to trust it if you want to trust and open it. Trust me, I'm not I'm a calm guy in it, so you can open it. So I'll open it up. Cool. So now we have our project. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to briefly go over the starter project so you know what's included. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll just briefly go over the main bits. So in our assets folder, you'll see that we have two folders. So we have our colored assets and we have our image assets for the people. So the reason why we have this here is because, you know, basically we're just using dummy data, and you'll see there's a little profile pic of me looking all dapper and handsome. So we've also got another folder called resources, and in resources I basically managed all these assets for you in this folder, so you can see how all the custom fonts are here, all the colors that we use in the project, all the images that we use in the project as well, and all the fonts as well. Just go full screen actually. And also as well, we have all the models that we'll be using in the app. So I'll be talking about those in the next chapters in this video coming up. And we also have a folder called view model, which is what we will use to basically manage our rooms, which again we'll be using later on. So this is just the base of the project for now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look at our design and see how we can actually break down our first screen, which is the feed, and how we can actually tackle this. So let's jump straight into that. So here I've basically got the Clubhouse design and sketch that I designed. Now, if you want me to actually provide this, then let me know in the comment section below, and I'll actually put a link in the description box. I just didn't know whether people wanted it or not. But what I like to do is I like to basically look at my design and plan out how I'm going to tackle it in, you know, either SwiftUI or UI kit. But since we're using SwiftUI, we're going to look at our feed and see how we can tackle this. So if I just go to our feed now, so essentially on our feed, what we basically have is we basically have a header here with these icons. So when I'm tackling this, I'm probably going to use a stack to align this horizontally, and then a spacer between here. So when we're looking at our list, we've actually got like a list of items which are actually quite dynamic. So in order to tackle this, I'm actually going to use protocols. So we'll use protocols so we can actually mix items, and we'll actually use a list as well, so we can basically put this in a list and you can scroll it and whatnot. And at the bottom here we actually have a view here, as you can see it's got like a bit of a gradient on it, and it's got a button and an icon. So let's jump back into our Xcode project, and first of all what we're going to do is we're going to tackle building this header view here. Cool, so let's tackle this now. So in our starter project, what I want to do is in the folder, just create a new folder here, so new group, and then we'll just go call this views. Cool. And then within this views, we're going to just basically create a new group, and we're just going to call this group headers. So the reason why I'm calling this headers because there's quite a few headers in this app, and it's going to be different headers as well. So the first one we're working on is a home one. So what I want to do is create a new view called home header view. So if we go to SwiftUI view and then home header view, All right, cool. So that's all sorted. So let's just go back to design quickly. And as you can see here, we have a bunch of like icons here, but they're all aligned horizontally. So in this case, it would make more sense to basically use something like a HStack. So let's use that now. So in here, I'm just going to delete the text and I'm just going to use HStack. And then within the HStack, we're actually going to use the images, these icons that I've already added into the starter project for you. So let's do this now. So cool. And you should see that on the screen now. So as you can see on our design, we actually do have a profile image here with like a corner radius as well. So let's add this in now. So we're just going to do image dot fit. And as you can see, you get to see my big ass head on your screen smiling at you. So what we actually need to do is we need to actually basically resize this. So let's use the SwiftUI property resizable. And then we actually need to basically set the frame of this to be the same height as what it is in our design here. So let's do that now. Cool. So as you can see, we've got our image here with our height. And what we actually need to do is we actually need to apply a bit of a corner radius onto it. So we'll use the corner radius modifier for that as well. Right, cool. So now we have all our icons in that we have at the top here. So the next thing that we need to do is actually move this search icon to the left-hand side, because as you can see, there's actually space between these two icons. Now, in order to do that, we can actually use a SwiftUI component called spacer. So let's add that in. Cool. And as you can see, it's actually spaced them out. And if we just go back to our design again, you can see here that each item actually has individual space in between them. So in order to do that, what we'll do is we'll actually add some spacing using the initializer on our HStack. So let's add this in also. Cool. So now we have our spacing. And then the next thing that we need to do is we basically need to apply some fonts and colors onto this. We essentially are using FS symbols, and because we're using SF symbols, we can actually treat these as text. So we can actually change the font and the color and the font size and whatnot. So let's do that now. And as you can see here that this font.nanito.bold is actually a custom font that I've added into the project for you. So you don't really need to worry about adding this in, it's already there. But essentially you can see here that by applying this bold font onto the HStack, all the SF symbols pick up that style. So it's just a nice way of doing it once and everything inside picks it up so we don't have to repeat ourselves. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to apply a width onto this, because essentially what I want is no matter what the container this is inside of, I want it to span the whole width by default. So let's do that now. Cool. And you can see here that compared to the other frame, we're actually using a different frame to actually set the size of this. So the one that we're actually using is we're using the initializer with the max width infinity. So obviously infinity never ends, so it's just going to be the whole thing. And we actually set a max height on this of 50 as well. So the container size is 50. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to apply just a bit of padding to basically push it from either side. So let's do this now as well. Cool. So you can see here with the padding, we're using dot horizontal, and we're basically saying that we want the padding to be 15 from here and 15 from here. So only apply it to the leading and trailing. All right, cool. So just another thing that I like to do personally, now you don't have to do this, you can skip this part, is I just like to make my views look more like components rather than just on the iPhone. So in order to do that, in the preview bit here, if you just add the preview layout and then just say size that fits, and then it basically makes it look more like a component. Like I said before, you don't have to do this, it's just personal preference for me. So cool. All right, so the next thing that we're going to break down is we're actually going to look at how we can build our upcoming view. So let's tackle this one next. So let's actually look at our upcoming view here. And as you can see, we basically got rooms that are upcoming, and some rooms you may be part of a group, which is why you have this title at the top here. But rooms where you're not actually part of a group, it doesn't actually display this at all. So what we're going to need to basically build this is like a mixture of HStacks and VStacks. So let's tackle this now. So back in the starter project, I want you to basically create a new folder here, home feed. So essentially, this is where we're going to put all the views that exist on our home screen, like all these sort of components. I'm going to sit in this folder here. So the next thing we need to do is we need to basically create a view. So we just go to and create a new view, and we'll call this upcoming rooms view. Cool. So underneath your upcoming rooms view, let's just create a view that will handle that where it displays information. So let's create this group room view now. And essentially what we want to do in this view is whenever a room is upcoming, we want to inject it into this struct and then basically essentially build out either the group, the VStack with the group and the time, or just the room itself. So let's just create a constant that we'll add here. So let's just call this upcoming room. We're going to start off with a HStack. And for now, I'm just going to put this text in here. Okay, cool. So I actually want to preview this so I can actually see what I'm building. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to actually create a group. So in order to create a group, there's two options. There's two ways of doing this. You can actually hold down Command on your keyboard and then click on this, and then you'll see an option to group it, or you could just manually type it out. But I'm just going to do it like so. All right, cool. So it's just this little thing here at the bottom. It's not really much yet, but it will be soon. So we just basically injected some dummy data into our group room view. So in the upcoming room. So again, this is something I've already done for you. So you just want to add the first one in the array and then just say preview layout size that fits. So now let's actually start to build this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the date and then apply some styles to it. Okay, cool. So again, you can see we're using our custom font and we're actually using our custom color here. So this actually isn't a color that comes with you know, Xcode like you normally get blue and red. So this is actually something that I've defined for you in colors.swift. So it's just a text color. So you can see here that we now got our time being displayed for our upcoming room date. Cool. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to basically tackle building out the group on the name of the room. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. We've done that. So if we just quickly go back, you can see here that obviously this is optional. So you don't actually have to have this on all the groups. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use optional chaining where if the group name is nil, then we're going to actually add it in here above here. So let's just do that now. Okay, cool. So it's starting to get there. It's not there yet. So as you can see, we actually want this we want this to actually be aligned to the top. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is on our HStack, we're going to change our alignment, and we're going to basically also as well add some spacing between this and here. So hard code it with 10 spacing. So let's do that now. Cool. And as you can see here, the actual group here, so these two, they're actually meant to be aligned to the left-hand side. So what we want to do is we actually want to change the alignment of our VStack that they're currently inside of. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. And just by looking at it, it seems like it might just be a tiny bit off. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a tiny bit of a padding just to push this down by 1 pixel. Okay, cool. So we just zoom in here and just inspect this now. To make it easier to inspect, let's just swap these two around. Right, cool. Yep, so we just zoom in and then we just look at this now. All right, cool. So there's one thing that I do want to mention. So you might, if you never saw this before, this modifier, essentially the reason why I've added it in is because I want this to basically be limited only to one line. So I don't want it to have like, 4 or 5 lines. So that's the whole point of this. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to look at how we can actually put this in a list in our upcoming rooms view. So let's do that now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to basically actually inject an array of upcoming views into this view. So let's do that now. Cool. So now we have an array of our upcoming rooms, and we should get a complaint down here at the bottom saying that we're missing an argument. So let's just add in this argument. And all you need to type in here is upcoming room.dummy data. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're essentially going to use a for each loop in SwiftUI, and we're actually going to mix that in with a VStack. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is just going to create a VStack, and then within our VStack, we're going to use a for each. So as you can see, let's just review this now. So we've got our VStack. So for each, essentially, if you've never come across this before as well, this basically just loops through an array of identifiable objects. Now, in upcoming room, I've already specified that this room is identifiable, so it can be uniquely looped through, so you don't need to worry about that. So that will do that. And then what we say is we basically want to get the room and we want to inject that into our group room view, which is why you can see all the rooms on the screen here now. So what we need to do is we need to apply a few more styles to actually make this look more like this. So let's do that now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change the alignment on our VStack. And then once we change the alignment, we then also want to add a bit of spacing. And then the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to add some padding and corner radius and a background color to this VStack. So let's do that now. There we go, ta-da. So essentially, we just compare these two now. So it's starting to look exactly like that. And you can see here, if it has a group, then it displays the group with the icon there as well. So yeah, this is looking good. Yeah, so I'm going to just add this again as a component, just so I can basically preview it easy. Okay, cool. So just to quickly review what we did here. So we basically have a VStack where we basically set the alignment and spacing. We use the for each component from SwiftUI to loop through our identifiable upcoming rooms, and then we inject that into our group room view, as you can see here. I then add a bit of padding on the inside to the left and the to the top and bottom. So it also has some padding to the left and the right. We also then add some frame, so it basically spans the whole size of the screen, and then we basically set the alignment. We also set the background color, corner radius, and then essentially at the end we just add some panning around the outside of the whole view so it squeezes it in. So the next thing that we actually need to do is we basically essentially need to build our actual feed item. So let's do that now. Cool. So we need to start to build our room like I mentioned earlier. So again, we just basically create a new SwiftUI file. We'll call this room view. So I've already created this model for you. So we'll just inject it in here. So it's called feed room. Cool. So this feed room, if we just inspect it, holds all the information about our room. And as you can guess here, it's identifiable. So we can later on use it in our list. So let's just inject this into here now. So I'm just going to say feed room dot dummy data, and then I'm just going to use the first one. Cool. Sweet. Right. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to basically build out the card for our feed room. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to basically put this text in a VStack for now, and we'll add the stuff later on. So yep, so it's going to do this now. So embed in a VStack. Cool. And then essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an alignment, some shadows and whatnot, but I'll type it out and then we'll go over that in a minute. Okay, cool. So just wrote that out. So let's step through this step by step. So essentially we've got a VStack that we're going to use later on to hold our components. I've added some padding to the vertical sides here inside of it, and some padding, sorry, start again. So I've added some vertical padding here, and we've added some horizontal padding here inside of it. Then we set the background color. So the background color of this card is actually white, which is why you're wondering like nothing's changed. It's in the asset, it's white, and when it's in dark mode, it's in black. Then what we also do is we basically set the corner radius here as well to 19, as you can see. And then we actually apply a shadow. So this is using a shadow modifier, which in SwiftUI is really easy to use. So essentially, all you need to do is just literally just basically set the color, and the radius that we set is 1, because we want it to be like a thick shadow, as you can see here. And then we set the Y to be 1 as well, so we want to almost sit underneath it, slightly underneath the card. And then we also set some padding horizontally outside of it, so it basically, again, similar to what we did with the upcoming view, it squishes it from the side, so it brings it together. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually fill out this card now with our text about the room, the host, and all that other information. So let's start and do this now. So before we actually do that, and there's something I just want to do. So as you can see here, it's possible to have a group. So it's possible to display a group here at the top, essentially. Now I don't want to be repeating code. So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to take out this logic here. If you go into upcoming room view, you'll see here the group name. So this group name view here with the text and a little house icon, we're actually going to refactor this into its own separate view so we can actually reuse it. So let's do that now. So underneath the group room view, so we're going to basically create a new view called current. So we're going to create it called current group view. And essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to basically copy all of this. So all the stuff, so the HStack with the padding, we're just going to copy all of that. And then we're just going to paste that in here. And then for in our struct, we're just going to create a new constant called group name. And then this is going to be of type string. So when you inject the group name, it will go into here. So essentially now what we all need to do is replace this HStack here. And then we're just going to basically create our group. So we're going to say group name. All right, cool. So now when it unwraps it, it'll inject that into here. So now let's go back to our room view. And here, let's start off. And we're actually going to use our new component. Okay, cool. So now we have our title in. So what we need to do now is we need to basically build this bit out here. So in order to tackle this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a HStack. And so we'll tackle the images first, and we'll actually see how we can actually create this effect where it has the one image layered over the other one. So let's tackle this now and discuss it. So yeah, so now we've done this. So essentially what we're doing is we're essentially checking to see if the room host pix is greater than 1. And if it is, then what we're going to do is we're going to actually overlay 2 images like we saw in the designs. Or if it isn't, then we just want to show the one image. But as you can see here, there's actually quite a bit of repetition. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to move this out into its own new component. So let's do that now. So you can see here, I also created this property called size to actually size the view. And that's what we're actually going to move as well also. So we're going to move this and all of this. So underneath here, we're going to create a new view. So we're just going to call this mark. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the size here that we have. And then paste it at the top here. And then copy this. And paste that in here. And then in here, we're just going to create a new constant called pic, which will be of type string. And then we're going to replace this with our new property. So it'll just be this, like so. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to replace these two with our new component. So we don't have to keep repeating ourselves. Sweet. And the reason why I did that is because it's actually going to make our lives a lot easier when we actually want to use the overlay, which is what I'm going to do now. So essentially with SwiftUI, if you want to display two images on top of each other like so, then it comes with a property, a modifier called overlay. So let's use this now. Cool. So now as you can see, we've actually said we want to overlay this view over the other view, and you can see that the picture's changed. So in order for us to see both pictures, what we actually need to do is we actually need to change the offset. So we need to actually say we want to move the offset of this. So let's do that now. So on the feed pic view inside of the overlay modifier, you want to use the offset. So just do a dot. So as you can see here, now we have our images and they're overlaid over one another. So that's pretty sweet. So now the next thing we need to do is we actually need to build our stack view here and the comments bit on below it. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So before I carry on, just to briefly just talk about what we've done here. So essentially we've got a VStack similar to what we did with our upcoming view, room view. But what we're doing now is we're actually looping through our participants. So these here are the participants. Now you might be wondering, why did I have to use this now and I didn't have to use it before? Well, we actually look at participants. It's actually a string. So it's not actually, it's not actually been marked as an identifiable object. So what we need to do here is we need to basically say we want to use each individual string as a unique identifier, hence why we say ID and then self. So then when we uniquely loop through each of the strings in the array, we're actually going to basically get the person and we're going to basically build this text here with this little chat bubble. Now this chat bubble here is not actually an icon, it's actually part of the emojis. If you want to access it, if you just go to edit and then emojis and symbols, and then you can just search for it in the search bar here. You just type in speech and then you'll see it there. All right, cool. The next thing that we need to do now is we actually need to apply some styles onto our text. So let's do this now. And then we need to basically push this from the left-hand side a bit. So on our VStack, let's apply some padding. And then the next thing we need to do is we essentially need to basically build out this bit here with the number of people in the room and the number of hosts that are currently on stage. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So let's just review what we've done here. So essentially what we've done here is we basically created a HStack and we created a text here. So we're basically using the number of participants property from the room. Now, this may be new to you. So what this essentially does, it essentially turns the value within the variable into a string. So our number of participants is actually an integer. So it can just get converted into a string. We're going to do dot description. So we essentially apply some padding to the text right-hand side here. Then we add an image. We add another piece of text here for the slash. And then we do the same thing with number of hosts, but this time we add trailing padding. And then at the end, we actually add the chat bubble as well. So you can see here, you can actually build up like really, simple, where you can build really complex UIs really simply with SwiftUI just by breaking it down into smaller modular components. So the next thing that we actually need to build now is we need to basically build our bottom view. So let's do that now. All right, cool, man. So we're making moves, we're making movements. So let's make some more moves. So we're going to actually basically build our bottom home view. So let's do that now. So in home feed, let's create a new SwiftUI view called bottom home view. So in order to basically build this bottom home view, we're actually going to need to use a ZStack this time, and we're actually going to need to use some gradients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically type this out and we'll go over it again. Okay, cool. So let's just review what we've done. So essentially, similar to what we did before, we set a map width of infinity. So it basically spans the whole screen. we've basically also given it a max height of 105, so we want it to always be 105. And I've actually set the alignment to be the top. So why did I do that? So the reason why I set the alignment to the top is because if we look at our design, the button is actually always close to the top of the container. So that's why I've done that. And then we basically used the background property, but this time we've actually passed in a linear gradient. So a linear gradient being a line. So in the gradient, we pass in a gradient object. So within that, we pass in an array of our colors. So we basically said we want the background to be 0.1, so it can slowly fade to the background color again. And we want to start from the top to the bottom. Cool. So now what we need to do is we need to actually add it in our button and our icon for the rooms. So let's do that now. So just to quickly review this before we move on to the bottom. So we're using the SF symbol grid again, setting the font, but we're doing this time. Now, what we're doing here is we're actually essentially saying that we want this to basically span the whole width of the container. So we can basically stick this to the right-hand side, and then we basically push it with some trailing. So now we'll add our button here in the center. Okay, cool. So now let's review our button. So essentially, we're using this new component that got introduced in iOS. So I think it got introduced in the last WWDC. Don't quote me on that. But essentially, what it does is it allows us to basically combine an FF symbol and a text component. So we've basically got our text here saying start a room, and we've actually got our image with our plus button here on the left-hand side. So it basically does that for us nicely, saves us a lot of time. And essentially what we've done is we just basically added some padding, set the font, background colors, and applied a corner radius. Now you may be wondering what this is. So anti-alias, it basically helps with the smoothing of the way the corner radius is drawn. So I'll just set this to true just to get a nicer smoothing. So essentially we've actually done now with our bottom home view. So what we actually need to do now is we need to basically hook all the components that we just built on our home screen and bring it together. So let's look into doing that now. All right, cool. So what we want to do is we want to now actually bring this all together and build out this whole screen. So let's do that now. So if we just go to the panel here, and if we just basically use our content view to hold all of this inside of, what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to use a ZStack. So we're going to use a ZStack to hold out all our components, and then we'll go from there. So I'll explain what it is that we're doing and the purposes why. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So let's review this now. So essentially we'll use the ZStack. So the reason why we've got this bottom here for the alignment will be clear when I get to it, and we don't need to discuss that just right now. So we've got a max height and width of infinity. So we fill the whole screen. We set the background color. Now this line here is really important because if we don't add it, you can see we get this effect. So we get this like white stuff at the top and bottom. Now the reason why that is because by default Xcode has something called a safe area layout, which is basically the box that's colored in now. So you can't go outside that box. But what we want to do is we actually want to turn that off so we fill everything on the screen. So cool. So that's good. So now what we want to do is we want to add in our header. So let's add in our home header now. Okay, cool. So now we've added in our home header and we've added it in a VStack, and we've added some padding on the top. Now it might not seem obvious now why I've added that, but what will happen is you'll see why we actually do need to add this in. So the next thing we've got to add in is our list of components. So let's do that now. So in order to add in our list of components, we're actually going to basically use a new component again that was introduced in the last WWDC called a vgrid. So essentially what a vgrid is it basically is a more efficient way of handling components in a list, and we're actually going to mix this in with a technique that I've been using for a while. Trust me, I'm not saying I was the inventor of this, but it's just something that I use in order for me to basically swap in between, you know, dynamic components. So let's look into doing this now. Okay, cool. So now as you can see that it's actually bumped it up to the top, which is why we added that pad on the top. And what we've actually got here is we've actually got a scroll view and a lazy VStack. So the scroll view is really important here because we don't have the scroll view, then essentially our list that we're about to build won't be scrollable. And also as well, we're using a lazy VStack because we want to lazily load the items in our VStack, and we've got a bit of space in there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to type this out, and then when I finish typing this out, I will then basically explain the concept, just so we can basically tackle it one step at a time. So let's do this now. Okay, cool. So that was a lot. So the reason why I want to write out is because it's quite a bit to discuss. So in order to talk about what we're actually doing here, we actually need to essentially actually break this up and go all the way back to the top. So let's go back. So we're gonna go back here. So we basically have this file called feed item, and within feed item, I have this protocol called feed. Now, what I want to do is I want to basically dynamically switch between the items that you see on the feed. So just to make this clearer and easier for you to see, I'm just going to pin this so you can actually we can compare it. So what I'm basically saying here is that each one of these items is a feed item that is uniquely identifiable, which is why we can loop through it in the list. But each feed item has its own property called item, which has a protocol. Now, because we're using protocols, it allows us to basically, create something that is anything that's any sort of type of that protocol. So if you look at our models, we have something here called upcoming feed item, which is a feed. And we also have a room feed item, which is also a feed. So essentially what we can do is we can basically create a feed item, which has an item of upcoming or room feed item. So in the feed item, what we actually do is we basically create an array of feed items, and then we actually add in our upcoming feed item for it. And we actually loop through all our possible rooms that we have and create feed items as well. So essentially what we're doing here is we're basically creating a struct of identifiables, and we're actually using the item property to dynamically switch between different rooms that you see on the screen. So if we go back to our switch statement, you can see here that we're actually checking on our switch statement. If the item is an upcoming feed item, then we want to show this component and pass it into here. Or, if it is a room feed item, then we want to show the room feed component and then pass that into our room view. And if it doesn't match either one of these two, then we'll just basically return an empty view. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that is a lot. And if you don't understand it the first time, it's calm in it. Don't worry about it. All you need to do is just basically just re-watch that segment that I just spoke about, and just basically break it down, and also as well inspect this and just play around with it yourself. But essentially, if we want to add a new component, all we need to do is essentially just create a new struct and then make it of type feed, and then match it in the case, and then match it to our view or whatever it is that we want to do. So that's how we make this dynamic. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to quickly just test this out. So if I hit the play button here, and then if I just basically scroll, you can see that I can actually scroll and see all the possible rooms here. So this is looking pretty good. It's looking really good. All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're actually going to add in our bottom view. So we're going to add this in now. So let's do that. Cool. And this is why I set the alignment for the Z stack to be bottom, because I wanted this to be pinned to the bottom, so everything gets pinned from the bottom hand side. But if you look at it, we've actually got a problem. So essentially when you're scrolling, you can see that this is almost blocking the last item. So what we need to do is we actually need to add some padding to this list component, or VStack I should say, to actually add some padding to the bottom of it. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So just make sure you add it to the lazy VStack, and we want to add a bit of space into the top here. So we're just gonna add some padding to the top. Right, cool. Right, so this is looking good. So you can see that we've actually just built our view for our home screen. Pretty simple. So the next thing we're going to look at building is we're basically going to build a new view, and we're actually going to call this view profile view. So let's look at how we can do that. All right, cool. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to basically build our profile view. So just to show you it here in Sketch. So you can see here we have our image and information about myself, so me. So what we're actually going to do is we need to basically create a component here called a header. So similar to what we did on the home screen, we want to create a header for the profile screen as well. So we're going to do that. And essentially all these components, we're going to use a mixture of VStacks and HStacks to basically get this desired layout. So let's do that now. So the first thing I want you to do is, well, the first thing we're going to need to do is in our headers, we're going to create a new header view called profile header view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So now we just look at our design. So we actually have a back button and we have an @ symbol and the gear. So let's add in this now. All right, cool. So just to be aware, if you have this highlighted at the bottom here, so make sure that this pin isn't highlighted in blue, so you can actually see what it is that you're building. And you can see now how we've added our font, our colors, the frame, and the padding. So obviously the items inside of the HStack are going to automatically inherit these font and foreground color styles. So if you look at our designs here, we actually do have the space between the @ symbol and the back button. So in order to just simply do that, again, all we need to do is just literally just add a spacer. So we're just gonna do it like so. And you can see how it now basically separates the two. So cool. So now we actually built our profile header view, and we'll actually come back to this and reuse it again. But what we want to do now is we want to basically build our profile view to display, all the information about, moi. So let's do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to our views and I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm just going to call this profile. And then we're going to create a new SwiftUI view called profile view. Cool. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to basically just set this up similar to what we did on our content feed where we have a Z stack so we can fill the whole screen with a background color. So let's do that now. All right, cool. And in order to basically build this out, we're just going to basically embed all these views in a VStack. So let's add a VStack in. All right, cool. So now let's add in our header view to our VStack. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a group to hold all our elements together. So the profile picture and all this information, I'm actually going to put all of this information inside of a group. So let's do that now. So the next thing we're going to do is underneath our image, we're actually going to add our text. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So it's worth noting as well, like obviously you don't have to put my name in here and you can just put anything in here. This is just for the tutorial. And we add the font sizes individually, and we also add padding to our username tag here. So what we want to add now is this view here with the followers and following. All right, cool. So let's just go through what we've just done. So essentially we've got a HStack here that we're going to use to hold these two items, and then we add some padding to the top to push it away from the username tag here. Then what we have is we basically have another HStack nested inside of that, but we set the spacing to 0 so we can customize the spacing ourselves. And then we basically add some padding onto the right hand side of the number, and then on this we actually don't need this padding, so we'll remove that. So we just need to add padding onto the number, and then we basically just set the fonts individually, and then we literally just copy this again, and then we just literally just paste it underneath below, because they're both the exact same thing, except we just basically change the text here to say 21 and then following rather than the followers. All right, cool. So the next thing we need to do is the bio. So let's do. So essentially, like we said, all this is going to be in a VStack, and we put this inside of our group. So underneath our HStack that we just built, we just add the text in, add some padding, and then put some fonts in. So again, this text can be anything. It doesn't need to be exactly what you see in here. And then finally, the last thing that we need to do is this little bit where you're nominated by someone. So let's do that now. So in order to build that, we're going to basically have to combine we're going to have to basically use another HStack again. So let's do. Okay, cool. So essentially, let's just run through this now. So what we've got is we basically got a HStack in here, and we basically set the alignment to the top, so everything gets aligned from the top hand side. If I just zoom in a bit more, just so you can sort of see. Okay, cool. Cool. So we basically got our image. So this person 0 is actually an asset that I've actually provided to you guys in the start project. So if you want to see all the possible people in this project, if you just go to the assets, so just go to assets, and then you'll see this folder called people, and they're all literally just listed there. So I've just said person 0 for now. So essentially person 0, we're going to basically resize this image to a width and height of 38 by 38 and give it a corner radius. And then what we're going to do is we're going to basically put this all in a VStack. So you can see here joined by the date here. So this is the date that the user joined by. But we actually do something a bit interesting here. So we create a text, and then we leave a space in our text here, and we apply a font. But then we also use the plus symbol on the end of it. So what does this mean? So essentially what we've done here is we basically combine two text objects together. So using this technique, you can actually basically style and change the way a string, looks. So you can have one portion of it black and another portion of it red. But in our case, what we're doing is we're basically making the nominated by a regular form, and then the actual name of the person we're nominated by bold. All right. So obviously there's one more thing we need to do here, and you can see here that obviously this here is still in the center. So we actually want to push all of this to the top. So in order to do that, all we need to do is just basically use a spacer. So let's do that now. Yep, so in our VStack, after we finish setting our 15 pixel horizontal padding, we just want to basically just add a spacer. Cool, and you can see how that shifts everything up. All right, sweet. So the next thing that we need to do now is we actually need to basically hook up this screen to our content view. So what we want to do is when someone taps on my face, we want to basically push to that view controller. So let's look into how we can do that now. All right, so let's look at how we can push to our profile view from our content view. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually add a closure to our profile icon. So when it gets tapped, we can basically perform an action, that action being pushing to the next view. So inside of our home header view, let's go inside of there. And then what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to use enums to basically trigger what action happened. So I'm just going to type this out, and then I'll basically break it down and explain it to you. So let me just do this now. All right, cool. So essentially what we're doing here is we're basically saying that we've got this enum called home header actions. So this enum basically is what we're going to use to declare which one of these were tapped. Now we're only working with the profile for now, so we're only going to handle profile. But if we want to do like the calendar or notification invites or search, then we will just add in the additional cases here. Then what we do is we specify a type alias. So essentially what this type alias does is it just basically makes our closure more readable. That's it. And then we actually define our closure here. So within our closure, we're essentially saying that it doesn't return anything. So this closure doesn't return anything. But when we execute the closure, it will basically give us a action, that action being the profile that we're about to pass in. And then we basically specify our handler that we use for our completion handler. and then we just basically, hook up the handler in the initializer. Now, you may be new to what at escaping is, or if you're not sure what it actually means. So essentially what this means is that you want to basically use this completion handler outside of this scope. So we're essentially going to use our handler here. So we're not going to be using it inside of here. So in order to use our handler and trigger that completion handler, we basically want to move. So we essentially want to basically move our handler into here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to use our closure slash completion handler inside of here. So when someone taps on this, we want to basically trigger it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our profile picture inside of a button and then call that. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. And just to drive home the point one more time, so you can see here now we're basically specifying that we want our completion handler, or the closure that we defined, to basically pass back the profile enum. Now you're gonna have an error down here, which is fine. So in order to resolve this error, all you need to do is just delete that and then just do that. So essentially here, this underscore basically means that we don't want to use the value that we pass in. So this value here, we don't want to use this in our completion handler. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this on our content view and actually see it in action. So on our content view, if we go back to it, we just want to remove this. And then this time we want to add action in, and then switch on the action. Okay, cool. So now you can see from before, we're basically passing through the action through here. So we can basically check it. So if it's profile, we can do something. I'm just gonna build a project to remove the errors. All right, cool. So now the next thing we need to do in order to actually push to our view, we actually need to use something called a navigation view. So let's add that in now. So in order to do that, all you need to do is if you hold down Command on your keyboard and click on the ZStack, you'll get an option called embed. So what we want to do with embed is we essentially just want to embed this in a navigation view. So click on embed and then just type navigation view. Okay, cool. So now you won't see anything, but it's actually added a navigation view. Now, when you add a navigation view, by default, you get the navigation view here, but we can't see it. But what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to run the app, just basically show you a problem that we're going to come across that we need to resolve now. Cool. And now, if we just go to Xcode, when that's finished running, we hit this. So this is the UI debugger. You'll see that's an issue here. So I don't know if you've clocked it, but we've actually got a navigation view blocking our items. So if we was to tap on this profile screen, nothing's actually going to happen. So what we need to do is we actually need to hide the navigation view and handle this header ourselves. So let's do that now. So in order to do that, what we need to do is if you just go into, let me get the canvas back up. Yeah. So if you just go into your navigation view, so on your ZStack, so underneath ignore safe area, we actually want to hide that navigation. So we can actually handle the navigation bar ourselves. So underneath it here, let's just say, cool. And now if we just stop it and run it again, and if we use the UI debugger, cool, you can now see that we actually don't have anything blocking our header like we did before. So now we can actually handle the state and navigation and with our own custom header view. All right, cool. So the next thing that we need to do now is we actually need to write some logic to actually push to that view. So in order to do that, what we're going to use in SwiftUI is a property wrapper called state. So we're going to essentially observe the state of a variable, and if that state changes, we're going to react and do something. So at the top here, what I want you to do is just basically type the following. All right, cool. And this is what we're going to use to basically manage whether we want to show the profile screen or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually add in something to our navigation view. So if you just scroll down here, so on our navigation view, we're going to use the onAppear. So we're going to use the onAppear modifier here. And essentially the reason why I'm using this is because when we go back to this view, I want to basically reset the state of the whole screen. So when we get back here, we're going to actually set our show profile variable to false. So let's do that. Okay, cool. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to use a navigation link. So our navigation link is what's actually going to help us push to that view. So I'm just going to type this out and then I'll explain it to you. So within our VStack, all right, cool. So essentially what we're saying here with this navigation link is we want to basically link this view to our profile view. So this is going to push to our profile view. So that's the destination it's going to. The tag that we're going to be observing is true. So if this picks up the value true, then it's going to trigger pushing to this destination. So that's our unique tag. And then the selection. So this is actually going to be observing our state variable show profile to check for changes as to whether it should push to our profile view. So if you never saw this before, essentially what this means is it's basically a binding variable. So what a binding variable is it essentially lets you listen to changes to that variable and react. So that's what's going to be happening here. It's going to be listening to show profile, and whenever the value changes, it's going to compare it to the tag, and if it matches, then it will trigger the navigation link. And then inside of it, we just pass an empty view here. So because we don't want to do anything, we don't want to show a view. So right now, this isn't going to work. And the reason why that is because we don't change show profile to true at any point. So what we actually need to do is we need to actually set show profile to true when someone taps the profile. So in our home header view closure here, so rather instead of using break, what we want to do here is actually set show profile to true. So let's do that. So now if we run this, you can see now that it pushes to the screen because we're changing the show profile to true. And when we go back to the screen, we set it to false. So we basically reset the state. But I don't know if you clock something that when we go to the screen, we actually have two back buttons. So what we actually need to do is, again, we get this navigation view on the second view controller for free as well by default. So what we actually need to do is we actually need to hide this navigation view on our profile view. So let's do that now. To the profile view, and then if you just basically scroll down, so underneath here we want to basically call the modifier to actually hide the navigation bar. So if you go back to your content view and then run it again, you'll see that we don't actually have the second navigation bar at the top here, but we've got a problem now. So we can't actually push back to our previous view because we're handling that well, I shouldn't say push, we can't actually pop back to our previous view because we're actually handling the navigation ourselves rather than the system doing it for free. So what we need to do is in our header profile view, we actually need to add another closure where we listen to the action, but this time we're going to use the environment to pop back to the previous view. So let's do that now. So if you go into the profile view, and then if you go into the profile header view, so in here, I'm just going to do what we did on this on the home header view. I'm just going to type out and then we'll just briefly go over it again. So as you can see, it's a very similar setup to before. So what we need to do now is we need to wrap our button and then call our handler. So let's do that now. So wrap our button in our back image. Cool. So obviously, so wrap our button in our back image here, and then in the previews is basically find the default implementation. So now if we just go back to our profile view, we should get an error saying that we're missing the argument handler. So let's implement that now. All right, cool. So now what we're going to need to use is the environment to actually, like I said before, pop back. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just type this out first and then I'll review it. So let me just do this now. All right, cool. So essentially what we're basically saying here is in our profile view, we want to access the environment's presentation mode. So that's the current presentation mechanism as to whether the view's being presented or pushed to or whatever that is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to access the system's presentation mode, and then we're going to actually call the presentation mode. So get the presentation mode variable, and then we're actually going to call the dismissed on the current presentation. So let's say, for example, if a view has been presented from the bottom, then when we call this, it will dismiss it. But if a view's been presented from, pushing to it from the side, then this will basically pop back to the previous view. So essentially what this is it's basically SwiftUI's way of manually handling dismissing views and, navigation. So if you ever need to manually dismiss or pop back to a view, this is probably the best way of doing it, in my opinion. So if we go back to our content view and we tap on our profile, you can see that it pushes to the view. And now if we tap back, it pops back to the previous view. All right, cool. So what we've done there is we've actually, handled navigation by, pushing and popping views. So the next thing we go look at is actually building a room. So when someone taps on one of these, we want to present a room from the bottom. So let's look into that now. Okay, cool. So when we actually look at our room, or if we just look at a room in general on Clubhouse, we obviously, again, we have another header that we need to build. But when we look at our actual room view, it's actually quite complex. So we basically got like a title here. We have our host on the stage. We have this bottom view, but also as well, we also have another section here where we have others in the room, and we also have another section called followed by speakers. And on top of that, each person can either be muted, or they could be new to a room and muted, or they could be a moderator or not a moderator. So there's quite a few states going on. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to break down this, and we're actually going to start with a smaller components such as the mute, new view, and all that. So we're actually going to work from the smallest component. So just building the host and the others view, and then we're going to build it up into a list. So let's look at that now. So the first thing we're going to do is build the person image view. So if there's a person, so if someone has a profile picture, then we'll show the image, but if they don't, then we'll just show like a default placeholder image. So what we're going to do is if you just go into your sidebar, into the sidebar here in views, we're going to create a new group called rooms. And then in here, we're going to create a new view. Well, actually, in here, we're going to create a new group called person. So in here, we're going to create a new SwiftUI view called person image view. So in here, we're going to create a new SwiftUI view called person image view. And this is going to basically hold the string for the person's picture. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So let's just review what we've done so far. So essentially with this person image view, we're going to pass in a string, which is going to be the name of the asset. And then in both cases, what we're going to do is we're going to resize it and then set an aspect ratio. And we're also going to use this clip shape. So what this clip shape container relative shape means is if it's in a group or some sort of view that, brings views together, and we set a corner radius, the corner radius of this view will be lush. So it'll be like, it'll basically be the same as its parent. So you won't get like weird like corner radius styles. So just keep the corner radius consistent. Now on the else statement here, if there isn't an image path, we just basically set it to person. Now this is a SF symbol that I've added in for you guys. So you can see here it's just an SF symbol, person fill. And then we basically set a background color on it and we just do the same thing. So in order to actually see this, what we need to do in the preview, like it's complaining, is we need to actually pass it something. So if I was to type in nil here, you should see it. So it's pretty big now because of we've not actually set size on the container. But if I was to pass in person 0 as well, you'll see it'll be massive as well. All right, cool, sweet. So that is actually fine. Don't be worried. This is part of the plan, man. Stay with me. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to basically build our view where we actually show whether the person is, you know, new or moderator or muted or all that business. So let's do that now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically build the new view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So what we've essentially done here is we've basically used the celebration emoji. So you can get that from emojis and symbols. We've added some padding around it, and we've also given it a background color, and we've actually clipped a circle. So you can see here we get a circle effect by basically clipping an actual circle onto the view, and then we use a shadow with a radius of 1 to basically create that solid shadow effect underneath the view. So the next thing that we need to create is our mute view. So our mute view is actually very similar to this view. So let's go back again into person and create our mute view. Okay, cool. So you can see it's very similar as before. Now we've been repeating this a lot. What I actually could do is I actually could, you know, put this inside of a view modifier. So we don't have to keep on repeating ourselves, but maybe I'll set that for you as a challenge to do. So a bit of homework. So what we need to do now is we actually need to start building our people view. So we'll start off with the other people because they're a smaller view, and then we'll work on the host people because they're a bigger view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So we created that other person's view. We created a new constant called person. So this is where we're going to basically build our view from the information that we have in the person. And in our preview, we basically done the dummy data for the feed room. We get the first one, and then we go into host, and then we also get the first host. So we can just add a person in here just to see what they look like. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to add our image in and the information, and that's possible. So if we actually look at our others view, it's only possible for someone to have a name and be new to the room. So they can't be muted and they can't be a moderator. So we're only interested in adding this new icon here. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So essentially, let's just review what we got here. So we're gonna basically build our view in a VStack because obviously it's stacked vertically. But what we're basically doing is we're actually going to overlay our new view over our VStack, and then we're going to basically change the offset for now to be -20 and 5, so it's on the left hand side. And then we have this property inside a person called state. So we'll just open up person. So inside of state, there's different types of room states that someone could have inside of this set. So you could be new, muted, or a moderator. Now, the reason why I decided to go with state as compared to just using an array is because I only wanted to make it possible where you can only have one type of the idiom. So basically, you can only ever have one new, one muted, and one moderator. So they're all unique. So that's why I did it like that. And what we're basically doing is we're basically checking to see if that set contains new. So if there's new in that set, then we want to show the new view. And if there isn't in that set, then we'll just hide it. So obviously, because you can't see it on the screen here, it's hidden. But obviously, when we come across a person who is new, then you will see it on the left-hand side. All right, cool. So the next thing we need to do is actually start to build out the rest of our view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So essentially, what we've done now is we basically put our image in a ZStack so we can align that to the top. And then what we've done is we basically added a HStack in for our text below. So we basically set the person's first name, we do some styling. So I've set a line limit of 1 because I don't want it to go beyond 1. Now, if it does go beyond the line, it will do the trailing automatically. Oh no, sorry, it won't do the trailing automatically because of the other property I've added to that I'll get to in a bit. So I've added some padding as well. Oh, actually, no, we don't need that padding, so let's remove that. Yeah, so we can remove the padding because we don't need that. But what I have added is I've added this minimum scale factor. So this minimum scale factor essentially means that if it becomes too big, what it will actually do is it will actually shrink the text down by 80%. So it will basically try and fit it all within the label. All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to do is just looking at our design. We're actually going to build our host host view. So let's do that now. Okay, awesome. So we basically created that. So basically created a new SwiftUI view called person view. Similar to what we did before, we have our person that we're going to inject into this view, and then we set it up in our dummy view as well, so we can actually just preview this whilst we're building. So now let's start to build this out. So this is a bit different because if you look at our designs, it's actually possible for someone to be a moderator, and it's also possible for someone to be muted and new to a room, and it can be muted and new to a room as well. So let's work with all these states bit by bit. So the first thing we're going to do is just handle the overlays for the muted and the new. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So similar to what we did before, we're just basically going to set the offsets for the two. So if the set contains new, then we'll show it. If it contains muted, then we'll show this. So you can see how we're doing two overlays to separate them side by side. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on adding our image into the view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So essentially what we're doing here is we basically got a group that's going to hold all our views together. Now this ZStack, I don't think we actually need it, you know. Yeah, I don't know why I did that in. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go back to my other person's view. I'm actually just going to remove the ZStack in both of the views because we don't actually need it. I'm not too sure why I did it. Similar to this, we don't actually need the HStack in the other person's view, so let's remove it from here as well. Yeah, that's fine. All right, cool. So you in the other person's view, you don't need the HStack or the VStack. Don't know, man. My mind is glitched in it. So anyway, so we go back to our person view again. Just remove the ZStack because it's not necessary. So in here, essentially what we're going to say is in our HStack, which we're going to use to display the person's name and the little star next to it. So what we're essentially going to say is that if the person is a moderator, then we're going to add this view in, and if they're not, then we're just going to just leave it and just add in the text as well. Add in the text. So let's work on adding in our star for the moderator. So let's do this now. All right, cool. And I'm hoping you can see that it's really small. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in a bit. So you can see that there's our moderator star there. So now outside of the if statement and just underneath it, we want to actually add the person's name. So the text, so let's do that now. All right, cool. So we've added in the person's name here next to it, but you can see that it's quite tight between the two. So what we'll do is that if this star is on the screen, so if the condition here matches on our image, we're actually going to add some padding to the right-hand side here. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So now we've got a bit more space between them. All right, cool. So now we've actually built our profile view. and we've got both the others and the other person. So what we need to do now is we actually need to basically create our views that's going to hold the list of these items. So in order to do this, what we're going to do again is we're going to leverage grid. So we're going to basically use a lazy VStack again, and we're actually going to this time delve a bit into columns. So let's look at how we can leverage that now. So if we just go into our rooms, I want to basically create a new view called others view. So others view is just going to hold the followed by speakers and the others in the room. So it's just going to be a generic view for other people that aren't on stage. And inside of our others view, what we're going to do is we're essentially going to inject a title. So there can be a title at the top of the view. And we're also going to inject the array of other people that are meant to be in this segment of the view. So let's do that now. So it should come plain here, which is fine. So we're just going to fill this out with some dummy data. All right, cool. So like I said before, we're going to actually be using a lazy VStack, and we're going to be using columns. So if we look at our design, it's actually a 4-column layout. So what we want to do is we want to specify a 4-column layout with spacing in between each item. So the spacing in between each item is actually 24. So let's do this now. So essentially what we're saying here is we're going to basically have an array of columns that's going to be a fixed size. So each item in this column is going to be 65 points or pixels. And then we're basically going to have spacing in between each column of 24. So now let's actually leverage this and use it with what we currently have. So what we first of all need to do is we actually need to use a VStack. And then we need to actually display a text item that's going to hold the name of the others, the title in the others view. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So now we've got our VStack with our alignment of leading and our titling with the color of the text. You can see it there. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually use our VStack to build up this grid of people. So let's do that now. And then finally, all we need to do is we just need to add in some padding on our VStack for the left hand side. So let's do that now. And the top as well, actually. Okay, cool. This is looking good. Okay, sweet. So the actually, yeah, looks better. Cool. So if you just go into your others person view, and if you just change the corner radius to 25 on the group, then that should resolve that, because Clubhouse has this weird corner radius. It's send my head west. Anyway, so let's just go over what we've done here. So like I said before, we have our columns where we say each item is fixed to 65 pixels and the space in between them is 24 per column. So we basically put that inside of a VStack so we can align the title with the grid underneath it. And then essentially what we do is in our lazy V's grid, we basically set our columns, we set the alignment to leading, so it aligns itself on the left hand side, and then we basically specify spacing. So spacing here is a spacing between each item, so each row of 10, and then again we loop through our people, and then we inject that into our other person's view. Now the reason why we can just loop through people like this is because if we check out person again, like I said before, it's identifiable. So because it's identifiable, it can uniquely be looped through each object. So let's build our view for the people that are on stage. So we're just going to basically call this view host view. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So if we just look at our design, it's only got 3 items. So we're just going to do a 3-column layout. And we're going to increase the size of this as well and the spacing a bit. So let's do that now. And then all we need to do is just integrate our lazy vgrid. So let's do that now. Okay, cool, sweet. So it's worth noting that we don't use the other person's view here in the host view. We actually use the person's view, but the setup again is very similar. So we just have our vgrid, lazy vgrid with our columns. We set the columns here, alignment leading, spacing between each row will be 10. And then essentially here, we just basically loop through our people and then we just set up our person view. All right, cool. So now what we need to do is we need to basically build our bottom room view and we still need to build our header. So let's do those 2 things now. So in rooms, we're just going to create a new SwiftUI view called bottom room view. And we just look at our design, it's going to be, we're basically going to build this very similar to the way we build the header, where we basically use a HStack. So let's do this now. All right, cool. So let's just review this. So we've done our padding and we're doing our size. So this bit is very important because essentially what we want is we want to align our bottom component to the top of our view. So that's pretty important that we add that alignment there, and then we set the background color. So now let's start adding in these components. Okay, cool. So now we have our button in, and let's add our other buttons in. Okay, cool. So now we've added it in. So again, you can get this from the emojis in the toolbar. So just to change this one actually. Right, cool. So now we have the hand raised one. So now what we need to do is we need to add space in between these two and space in between the items. So to move this to the left hand side, again, similar technique, we'll just use a spacer. And then to add space in between each item, we're just going to basically, again, do some spacing. Right, cool. But this looks a bit bigger than this, so we're going to reduce the padding a bit on here. Okay, cool. All right, that looks good. And then finally, let's build our header here. All right, cool. So now we have the basis in here, and as you can see again, we've used label so we can leverage the SF symbols and just put it automatically next to our text. So to move this to the left hand side, similar technique again, you guessed it right, spacer. So let's add that in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add in some sizing and padding on our HStack. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So now we've built that. So now let's bring all these components together. So let's create a new view called active room view. And the first thing we're going to do in this view is we're just going to basically set up our ZStack. So similar to what we did before, we're just going to basically make it fill the whole screen. But this, and we're also going to basically set the alignment to be from the bottom. So let's do that now. Cool. So we set up our ZStack where everything's got to live inside. So we basically set the background color, ignore the safe area, and we've hidden the navigation bar so we can manage it ourselves. So what we need to do now is we actually need to start adding in what we need. So first things first, let's just inject our room into here. And then we're going to create a VStack to hold our elements in the view. So let's do that now. And if we just look at our design, all of this is scrollable. So we're going to put all of these host views and whatnot inside of a scroll view. So let's do that now. So as you can see, the VStack is way up here at the top. So we actually need to push this down. So let's add some padding onto our VStack. Cool. And then on our scroll view, we're going to apply some styles as well. So I'm going to say, okay, cool. So let's just review this. So we basically got a VStack and we basically put some padding on the VStack to move everything down. In our VStack, we have our header view here where we add some padding bottom to push it away from this card that we have. And then we have our HStack here, which holds the title and the options. So for more, and we got a spacer in between them so we can actually get it to fill the width of the screen. And then we apply some padding onto our HStack to push this down, add a foreground color of text black so everything in here gets that color. And then finally, we basically set the font of everything inside of this HStack as well. All right, cool. So it's also worth noting as well on the scroll view, the reason why they padded bottom is so when you scroll to the bottom, you have the space at the bottom for the bottom view that we're going to add so it doesn't get overlapped by it. And obviously we just do some more stylings as well with the corner radius and whatnot. All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to do now, we're actually going to add in our host view now. So let's do this now. Okay, so now let's add our hosts in. And then what we're going to do on our host view is we're actually going to add some padding. So let's add some padding to push it in. All right, cool. And then if you actually look at our designs, it's actually possible for there not to be anyone that's actually followed by the speaker if you actually use the app yourself as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if that array is not empty and then show that view. So let's do that now. All right, and cool. And now we're going to basically add in the other people that are just in the room. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm just going to change the properties here. And then rather than this being followed by a speaker, this is going to be others. All right, cool. So now if we just hit run, we'll see that we now get a list of all the people in a nice grid. So the last thing we need to do is just add in our bottom view and then we can wrap up on the room view. So outside of our VStack, we just want to add our bottom view. Cool. So now if we run this, cool, looking good. All right. So next thing we need to do is we need to actually handle presenting the room. So let's do that now. So we just go back to our content view. What we actually want to do is when someone taps on one of these rooms, you want to basically present the room from the bottom. And if someone taps the leave quietly at the bottom, we want to dismiss the view. So what we actually need to do is we need to basically track what the active room is. Now with SwiftUI, there's actually a property wrapper called environment. So the whole purpose of environment is to literally maintain the state of a view model between multiple views. So in our case, we're going to use the environment to track the state of our active room, and then we're going to react and present that active room as well. So let's look into doing this now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically use the room view model. And if we just inspect the view model folder at the start, when we're in the getting started chapter, essentially here we have a room view model observable object. It's a very simple class. All it does is literally track what room is currently active. So this is what we're going to use in our environment. So in your content view, we need to basically create a property to inject the view model into via the environment. So let's do that now. Okay, cool. So now we have our room view model that we will inject into the environment. Now, when you're using environment objects, you want to be very, very careful, because if you don't inject into the environment, like I'm going to show you in a minute now, your application will crash. So so we can get into the habit, we're going to do this in our preview here. So underneath the content view, we're just going to say environment object. And then this will inject our room view model into the environment. So now this state, our observable object, our room view model, is available within our content view. And what we also want to do is at the root of our app, so in the clubhouse.app file, we also want to set the environment object here. So we just want to do that here as well. So it's really important that you do this, because if you don't, your application is going to crash. And essentially, this is what allows us to manage the state of our view model between different views. All right, cool. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to basically create another state for handling whether we should actually present the room view or not. So let's create another state variable for presenting this. Okay, cool. And as you can see, by default, I basically set this to false, because obviously when you run the app for the first time, you don't want to present anything, so it's going to be false. So what we then now need to do is when we tap this item in the list, we want to basically change the state of our presenting room. So essentially, someone taps this, we want to basically say that yes, we want to present a room, and we also want to set the active room that the user has just selected. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to scroll down to our room view here, and then we need to actually add a on tap gesture. So with the on tap gesture, that will actually listen to when this is tapped. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So you have the modifier in here, and within this closure, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to basically set that we want to present the room. So we're going to say is presenting room, and then we're essentially just going to say is equal to true. Right, cool. And then what we're going to do here is we're actually going to set our view model to the active room. So let's do that now. All right, cool. So essentially, we basically call our view model to set the active room using our property from here. So we get the room from the current property that we're on. Sorry, the current room feed item that we're on. So that will set that there. All right, cool. So what we want to do is we actually want to inject our environment variable into our active room. So let's do that now. So let's go into our active room view. And inside of our active room view, we're going to delete this line here and replace it with the environment object for our view model. And then we're going to get a lot of complaints of it, complaining that it can't find it in scope no more. So wherever it says room, we're just going to basically replace that with view model dot active room, and then the property that it needs to access. Okay, cool. And then in here now, we don't actually need this anymore. So we can delete that. But what we will do is we will just basically set the environment object again for the room view model. All right, cool. So yeah, so this is looking good. So now let's go back. Okay, so the next bit that we need to do is we need to basically present our room view from the bottom and inject our view model using the environment object modifier. So underneath the on tap gesture, we're actually going to use a presentation modifier offered by SwiftUI. So let's do this now. Okay, cool. So let's just quickly just review what we've done so far. So essentially, what we basically use here is the full screen cover modifier. And what it's going to do is it's going to check the state variable that we created above called is presenting room. So if is presenting room is equal to true, then this is going to trigger. And then what this is going to do is going to present this view over the full screen. And when we present this over the full screen, we're actually injecting our view model from the top here into our room view via an environment object, so we can access the same state that we had when we actually launched our app for the first time. So let's see what happens now. You just run this. So if I tap on this, you can see here how it grabs the information about the room and it presents it from the bottom. So if we try out a different room, so I just stop it and then run it again. So if I click on tea time, you can see here tea time, and it has the speakers, and it basically has the other people in the room, and it doesn't have the followed by speakers because that one, the array is actually empty. So we're actually tracking the states perfectly here. So now, obviously, we can't actually close this. So what we need to do is we actually need to, on our active room, within our bottom view, and we actually need to basically add a handler to dismiss this using the same environment variable that we use on our profile screen. So let's do that now. So let's go into our active room view, and then we'll go inside of our bottom room view. And then in here, we're going to create an action for the leave. So let's do this now. Okay, cool. So similar to what we did before, we're just going to just literally create an Eden with some actions. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this leave in a button. So let's do that now. And now it should complain saying that you've not implemented it in the preview, which is fine. So again, just delete that. Underscore in. All right, cool. So next thing we need to do is we essentially just need to use this within our active room view. So in our active room view, and we're just going to do that. So right, cool. So similar to what we used before in our profile screen, we're going to use the same environment presentation again here. So at the top of your active room view, let's add that in now. Cool. So now we basically use the presentation mode wrap value to basically just dismiss our view. So wow, I look like I'm glowing, man. It's sunny in Manchester right now, which is why it looks like I'm, you know, grilling in it. I look like I'm under a grill or something. Anyway, so basically what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna run this. So let's go back to our content view, and now let's run the content view. So now if we tap on this, all right, cool. If we tap leave quietly, sweet, dismisses it. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to basically run this on a actual device on the simulator. So let's do that now. Cool. Okay. Leave. Cool. Profile. Cool. It all looks good. And because I got you back, because your boy got you like that. So we actually go into Xcode, and I'm just going to dismiss this. And if we actually change the app to dark mode by just checking this toggle here and then turning it on, so you can see that the app automatically picks up dark mode. Now this is not juju or dark magic, So essentially, the reason why you get this for free is because if you go into the assets folder, on the colors, we've actually specified the light and dark appearance, so the app will automatically pick that up for us, so we don't need to do anything else. We basically get all this extra stuff for free. Okay, so that was everything in this video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed the way we broke down this really complex and you know, it is a difficult UI to build in SwiftUI. So if you liked this video, please give the video a thumbs up. Also as well, don't forget to share it with people and your friends. Leave comments in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. If you have any other ideas of any other apps that you'd like me to build, I actually do have a few in the pipeline. I've got a treat for you in it. So that's everything from today. That's everything from me. I'll catch you guys in a bit. Deuces.